Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our very last video in Series 2. So this is video number 8 of 8 in our series on developing a winning quant mindset. My name is Charles Bibelos. I'm the GMAT Club's resident verbal expert, also a GMAT tutor at gmatninja.com. And even though I'm the verbal expert, today is going to be all quant. And the last few times we did quant videos, I lost my voice. So everybody, please say a prayer for my voice. I've got a bucket of honey and a bucket of cough drops over there. So what are we doing today? So today's video is about data sufficiency, but this is the advanced data sufficiency. So this is sort of the analog, the quant analog to the video we did last week. So last week, week 7, we did a video on how to go from great to incredible on sentence correction. This week's is kind of the equivalent thing, but for data sufficiency. If you're joining us for the first time, if you haven't seen the video we did a few weeks back on data sufficiency technique, on how to invest properly in data sufficiency, you might want to check that one out first. I'm going to kind of assume that you know some of those ideas about pushing the question, doing everything humanly possible with the question itself before you jump into your answer choices. I'm going to pre-assume that you guys have thought about that, worked on it a little bit. And what we're doing today is going to be a little bit of a hodgepodge. So as you get to the super, super advanced stuff on data sufficiency, or really on anything, some of those nice clean sound bites start to go away. So there are some things we can talk about when we did our videos on reading comprehension, for example. We can say, hey, there's a structure you want to follow, a way you want to think about how to read that passage. Here's some nice, simple advice, or at least simple sounding advice, makes an okay soundbite of how to approach it. Now, as we get to the really advanced stuff on data sufficiency, some of that starts to fall away a little bit. There's basic principles you definitely need to follow. Again, we covered those in a previous video. And now we just kind of look at a whole bunch of things, a whole conglomeration of things that make these questions really, really difficult. I did my best today to pick questions that are going to be grouped a little bit thematically. First round is going to be kind of more algebraic type questions, or at least algebraic looking. Some of them have layers of logic. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Second round is going to be more word problems and data sufficiency with some particular issues and some things I want you guys to think about. But again, we're not going to have those clean sound bites we've had in some of our past videos. Going to be a hodgepodge of stuff that hopefully you guys will find pretty tough. So let's go ahead and jump in. We'll give you 2 questions to start out as a warm-up. One of them I think we did a variation on a few weeks back. These 2 shouldn't be too bad for you. And once again, if you're here with us in the live audience, please, 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 as soon as you have an answer, spit it out at us. Always really good for me to see how you're doing. I'm used to working one-on-one with people, not talking into a 2-inch plastic camera. So the more I know about who's struggling, who's not struggling, what kind of answers you guys are picking, helps make the rest of the lesson better. So please, please don't be shy, especially if you're going against the grain. Give you guys about 3 minutes or so for these first 2. Give you guys about 30 more seconds. And even if you just have one of them done for the live group, feel free to let us know what you've got. All right, let's jump on in. So again, the thing we talked about a few weeks ago on data sufficiency, very, very key core principle, is make sure that you're doing everything humanly possible with the question before you even look at the statements. Looks like we're getting all sorts of different results from the live group. Awesome, means we're picking hard stuff. Makes me happy. Not happy or struggling. We'll fix it. All right, so question here is just what's the value of c plus d squared? Hopefully most of you, if you've done a little bit of studying for the GMAT, you see these special quadratics everywhere. The GMAT's absolutely, absolutely obsessed with them. I have no idea why, but you see these special quadratics all over the place. So let's expand that out, see what we can do with it, see if we can make it look different. Again, our goal is a starting point on data sufficiency. See how many different ways you can rewrite that question, different equivalent questions. That's going to make it a whole lot easier once you get down to your answer choices. So we'll expand this out. C squared plus 2cd plus d squared is equal to what? Great. Well, here's the thing. We already know what c squared plus d squared is. That's 29. So I can just rearrange this a little bit, replace the c squared plus d squared with 29. So now we've got 29 plus 2cd is equal to what? Now here's the thing, it's data sufficiency. Our question isn't what is the value, it's what do I need in order to get to the value. We know what 29 is doing, that's not a mystery. We know what the 2 is doing, that's not a mystery. What do we actually need in order to answer this question? All we need is CD. That's it. D by itself does nothing for you. Statement 2 is exactly what you want. Your answer is B. So again, if you invest really well up front, everything happens much, much more quickly and smoothly. All right, second one, I think, judging by the answers from the live group, looks like the second one was a little bit tougher for folks. This looks a little less user-friendly. Here you kind of, I think a lot of you look at that and you recognize that special quadratic. Here, a little bit less special. Okay, you got the -2 and the -2, but it's 2 different variables. Doesn't look as nice. But same thing. Let's go ahead and expand it out. See what happens. See if we get anything that we can clean up. CD minus 2D minus 2C plus 4. Is that equal to 4? And real quick here, notice that whenever I'm doing this process of pushing the question, very, very small thing, looks insignificant. I carry that Q and that question mark through. The reason is I don't want to get confused between a fact, this right here is a fact, and the question. So I always keep writing that question mark, keep writing that Q, make sure that I don't get confused under time pressure. We all get confused, doesn't matter who you are. Okay, so we can keep going a little bit. Those 4s are gonna, we can subtract 4 from both sides. So now we have CD minus 2D minus 2C, is that equal to 0? And I suppose I could clean this up a little bit more. It would look a little bit nicer if those aren't negatives. So let's go CD equals 2D plus 2C. Question is that a true statement? And would you look at that? That's exactly what we have for statement 1. Statement 1 is sufficient. Statement 2, that's not going to do anything for us. I mean, you could go ahead and punch in here, replace C with D or D with C. What I'll do is I'll replace the D's up here in the question with C's. So now we get is C squared equal to 2C plus 2C, still a question. May or may not be. This could be true, but certainly doesn't need to be true. There are cases where this would be true, but cases where it wouldn't. That's not sufficient. Our answer here is A. So, okay, there's your warm-up. All we're looking for here is just on these first 2, get your brain working, a little bit of algebra, and make sure you're thinking really thoughtfully about pushing the question. Some people will say to me, hey, I can't write all that stuff out. It saves you a crap load of time in the long run. Trust me, if you do this, the questions go much faster, you get more accurate. That little tiny act of writing out the Q and the question mark takes me no time at all. Being systematic is the key here. All right, let's go to the next one. Still getting warmed up a little bit. This one isn't too bad, I don't think. But now we have a little bit of a logical layer, and it's less purely algebraic, a little bit more to it. Give you guys a couple minutes on this one. Okay, sounds like we're not getting tons of disagreement here. That's great. Um, One of the things I sometimes see here on statement one, so sometimes I get people who kind of go down this road of like, hey, let me pick a whole bunch of numbers and see what's going on, and what if x is positive and y is negative, and what if they're both positive and what if they're both negative. Bottom line here is you have absolutely no way to determine what the sign of c is unless you have some sense of what x and y are. Easy enough to get rid of AD. Second statement, obviously nothing about c there, fine. And now if you go ahead and divide out -2 from both sides of this, cleans you up a little bit. We get x is less than y. As soon as you divide or multiply by a negative, sign flips. So here's statement two. Statement one again is this. And hopefully you're just thinking a little bit logically. Yes, it's algebra, but this is kind of your warm up to thinking a little bit about, well, you can't just manipulate here. You've got to think a little bit about the properties of these numbers, just a little bit. And as we get into harder questions in a minute, you get more of those questions where you have to kind of toggle back and forth between algebra, nice mechanical work versus a little bit of logic. This one's looks algebraic, a little bit of logic. If we multiply both sides by c as we go from this statement to this statement, the sign flips. All we did was we multiplied both sides by c, sign flipped, means c must be negative. And there you go, your answer is C. All right, warm-up's over. Next question's tougher. You guys will love this one. Give you a couple minutes. Oh, I like it. So far we have some C's, some A's, some E's. Do we have any takers for B or D in the live group? Give you guys maybe 20 more seconds. Don't be shy. Can't even go against the grain on this one because there really is no grain. Fantastic. Tough question. Not going to lie. Perfect. This is great. Thank you, everybody in the live group, because we're getting all kinds of answers. It's fantastic. Um, so I'm going to start by showing you um, what I want to do. My first instinct here, and it's actually not a good instinct. I really just want those fractions out of there, and it's kind of cool. There's fours on both sides, so I'm like, yeah, let me just multiply both sides by 4y. What do I get? So if I multiply both sides by 4y, I get x is bigger than y, and that's it. I win. BC is out. Answer is either A or D. This is great. Here's the problem. Remember on that last one, we were talking just a little bit about how with inequalities, when you divide or multiply by a negative, sign flips. And all of you probably know that already. The thing is, when you have a variable, it's really, really easy to forget. And there's kind of a thing that happens here. It's kind of funny. If I were to give you just a y down there alone, you might be a little bit less tempted to just multiply it over. There's something about the fours here that just make you want to multiply it out and assume that 4y is positive, but you actually don't know that. You can multiply by the 4y and get this, but you get this only if y is greater than 0. And if y turns out to be less than 0, it's going to go the other way. X would be less than y, and that's if y is less than 0. So right there, we have two different answers, contradict each other. Answer is not A or D. Statement 2, easy enough. We can manipulate this a little bit. Minus x plus y greater than x plus y. Again, all we have to do is combine like terms, no addition or so just addition and subtraction. No need to multiply or divide here. So we end up with the y's canceling out, add x to both sides. We get 2x is going to be less than 0. So x has to be less than 0. Fantastic, but that doesn't tell us anything about y. And now as you try to put these two together, what happens? The thing that feels wrong here is that x is less than 0. But look at what we have here. It depends on whether y is greater or less than 0. Right? So there's a temptation to look at this and go, hey, that's not sufficient. Answer must be E here because I want to know if y is less than 0. All I know is whether x is less than 0. Not enough. Circle E. Get out of here. Careful. What I'm going to do this time around with that top statement, I'm just going to multiply by the 4. I'll leave the variables where they are. So we get x over y is bigger than 1. Now we know that x is negative once we put them together. Now, one of the things I threatened a few minutes ago is as you get to harder and harder data sufficiency, these little algebraic looking guys, as these get harder and harder, what happens? They try to get you on this intersection of algebra and logic. A little bit of algebra, a little bit of logic. You got to go back and forth a little bit. We're doing algebra, we're doing algebra. Wait a minute. If you just keep doing algebra, it's actually really hard to solve this. Now you got to engage a little bit in what's going on. X is negative. X divided by y gives me a positive number, something bigger than 1. That means that y has to be negative as well. And if that's the case, we are absolutely in this world, we can multiply the y across and we get this, that x is less than y. We now have an answer to the question. Answer is actually C. Mad props to the couple of people that got C in the live group. Tricky stuff. And this is what starts to happen as you get harder and harder questions on quant. One skill won't do it for you. It's your ability to be flexible and move back and forth between different skill sets, different ways of thinking. All right, good times. Let's see you guys do it this next one. I have a feeling some of you are going to get this right really, really quickly. Some of you will get this right really, really slowly, and some of you might really struggle. I think we're going to get a variety on this one. So go ahead and check out this next guy. I'm going to try to be pretty strict. I'm going to try to give you 2 minutes on the button as best I can. So give you guys 2 minutes. Good luck with this one. Give you guys about 30 more seconds. And as always, please don't be shy. As soon as you get something, go and spit it out. All right, not getting too many people picking anything wrong here, which is great. So a lot of why I like this question, it's just a reminder of a certain tool for dealing with inequalities. Um, Now, I think where some people tend to struggle, I think the thing I said before, let you guys work on this question, was sometimes I see people take an eternity on this. There'd be 4 minutes, 5 minutes. The reason is that on this first statement, or really on the statements individually, I get a lot of folks who kind of go, well, wait a minute, let me pick numbers forever without any real logic to the number picking. And that's where things tend to go kind of wrong here. I think you might know if you've watched some of these broadcasts before. Not a huge fan of number picking. I can come up with examples, a handful of official examples. I can certainly write an example where number picking works pretty well on quant questions. You don't see a ton of them. If you're shooting for an elite score, there's not a ton of moments where just kind of arbitrary random number picking is going to get you anywhere, or even targeted number picking isn't usually the most efficient solution path. Once in a while, it's rare. This is a case where I think it's a little bit tough to see the logic behind why this is not sufficient. Some of you might be looking at this and going, well, if I know that y, it's just nicer to have the y on the left side by itself. That's why I multiplied both sides by a -1. I think a lot of people look at this and go, well, if y is less than -2z, why would I know that y is greater than z? And that logic is totally sound. Some people will go through and pick numbers forever. Really slow way to do it. Bottom line here is this is definitely not sufficient on its own. Think about what's going on. If you really want to pick some numbers, you could do so strategically and say, well, and we want to know in the end, is y greater than z or not? So what if y is 0? And I'm trying to pick the easiest things I can think of. If y is 0, that means z has to be negative. So I'll say -2 or something. Is y bigger than z? Yep. Now what if we go the other way and we pretend that z is 0? Great, then y has to be a negative number. Is y greater than z now? Nope. And now you've just very, very easily, just by kind of thinking about the properties of the numbers, if you can't read this piece of algebra and kind of deduce logically, just kind of thinking about it a little bit, that's not sufficient. And you need to pick numbers, okay. Be really careful, be strategic, pick things that are going to be intuitive, have properties that you can test easily. Here you go, AD is out. In the interest of time, because we've got 3 or 4 word problems coming up, they're going to take us a few minutes. Statement 2 is very, very similar. Can get rid of that. Now, what do you do with these two together? I see a lot of people driving themselves absolutely nuts. Lots of number picking, lots of kind of scratchy beard meetings about properties. Well, if z is negative and y is positive, you can drive yourself nuts. Easy. Add up the inequalities. As long as those mouths are facing the same way, the two big guys here better be bigger than the two little guys. So let's add the two big guys. Z minus y greater than 2z minus 2y. We can add 2y on both sides, subtract z from both sides, and there you go. Quick little bit of algebra mixed with a tiny, tiny bit of number picking if you need it, tiny bit of kind of logic on those answer choices individually, and you can be out of here pretty quickly with a C. All right, that's enough of the algebra, the straight algebra for today. Now let's play with some word problems. And these are some of the wordiest ones. A lot of these are based on official questions. I tried to tweak the language so you can't Google them very easily. Give you 2 or 3 minutes on this one. All right, not bad. Getting only a little disagreement in the group. So again, the key here, data sufficiency, whenever you have the opportunity to push the question, push the question. Tons of different ways to deal with overlapping sets questions. This isn't the only way. I think this is the thing most people have learned at some point. This is the thing most people tend to enjoy. I think it's the most efficient, most visually appealing. If you prefer your Venn diagrams, knock yourself out. For me personally, not my favorite thing because I tend to mislabel things. This works better for me personally. If this is your cup of tea, great. We'll go ahead and do it this way. 300 students study German or Hindi or both. 100 do not study German. I'm going to start with the 100 do not study German, pop that in there. Thing I'm after is how many study both. Now here's the key. 300 students study German or Hindi or both. There's actually, aside from the 300, there's another implied number there. 300 students study German or Hindi or both. That means that nobody studies neither. This is a big fat zero. And now we're off to the races. So 300 people total, have to be 100 that study Hindi but not German, have to be 200 that study German. And actually now that question's super, super easy. We have tons of stuff in our little matrix before we do anything. How many study both? If you really want to translate the question, you certainly could. How many study both would be if you knew this. How many study German but not Hindi? For that matter, if you just knew how many study Hindi, that would do the trick as well. Plenty of ways to get to the answer here. And here you go, statement one, 240 study Hindi. Exactly what you want. So 240 study Hindi, that means 140 study both. Sufficient. I have the benefit of an eraser. You don't have that on the test. 60 did not study Hindi. So same idea. 60 don't study Hindi. Because this is zero, as long as you caught that off the bat, push the question, catch that language that everybody studies German or Hindi or both. This is 60, 140 again. Answer's D. Everybody's happy. All right. This next one, I have a feeling this is actually one of the, I think, most discussed quant questions on GMAT Club. Something that shows up quite a bit in some of the GMAT prep tests. I've changed it enough. I think you'll get a new thrill out of it if you have seen this before. And even if you have seen it before, see if you can do this under 2 minutes. This next one is something that if you make the wrong choices, you'll be here for 4 minutes. Even if you get it right, it'll take you 4 minutes. There's a couple of things, if you're really thoughtful from the start, should be able to get through this one really, really quickly. Give you guys a couple minutes. And bonus points for anybody who catches the reference. Who's Steph? This is great, getting absolute silence from the live group. Tells me you guys aren't doing it the most efficient way. Give you about 30 more seconds, maybe, see if you guys can get to something. All right. If you're struggling to get through this in less than 2 minutes or even less than 3 minutes, no shame. It's actually one of the most time-consuming questions that shows up in the GMAT prep. I changed some things. Changed it from Carlos to some guy named Steph. 10 points for anybody who gets the reference. Steph in the Popcorn Factory. Nothing. All right. So this is one of those great questions where there's a whole bunch of different things you could do to make your life more efficient. A whole bunch of things you could do to make your life less efficient and take you 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Again, it's not a super hard question. It's really just a conversion question. A little bit of rates, not super, super hard, a little bit of inequalities, fairly fundamental pieces of math. But again, the GMAT's all about decision making. So it's not, can you solve the question? Why is the test time pressured? Because what the GMAT's trying to chase on the quant in particular is, can you make good decisions about finding the best path forward, not just a path forward? In this particular question, tons of different things you can do. Every little decision has a consequence. So let's get rolling. Again, I want to push the question first. That's always the first thing I'm after. We know that he jogged for half an hour. The question is the distance greater than 3 miles an hour? Well, I can convert that into a rate in miles per hour, right? So if the question is, so he definitely jogged for half an hour, was a distance greater than 3, that's the same thing as asking, was his rate greater than 6 miles per hour? Now the temptation here, and this is the thing that I see almost always from my students, if they haven't seen this question before, you want to jump into these answer choices right away and go, okay, great. All I have to do is convert this 9 feet per second into miles per hour. I got it. And then I can convert this 8 feet per second into miles per hour, and I got it. First of all, these are not the most convenient numbers. 5280. And by the way, that's about my altitude right here. I'm in Denver, Colorado, 5280 feet. Everything's 5280 this and 5280 that, 5280 magazine, 5280 car repair. Really inconvenient number though, not divisible by a lot of great things, kind of a pain. So if I have to do the conversion twice, this is going to stink. So 9 feet per second, I convert that into miles per hour, and then I convert 8 feet per second into miles per hour. I'm doing 2 conversions, unwieldy conversions, not cool. Better, what if I take this 6 miles per hour, convert only once into feet per second? I just cut my effort, my arithmetic, my opportunities to make an error, my time spent almost in half by doing that. So let's roll. 6 miles per hour, I want that in feet per second. So 6 miles per 1 hour. 1 hour is going to be 60 minutes. 1 minute is going to be 60 seconds. And we're not done yet. We need to deal with the miles, and we want this in feet. So 5280 feet is 1 mile. That's kind of ugly, but let's see what we can do here. So our units cancel out, just double checking, make sure I know what I'm doing. Minutes, we got feet per second. Good, that's exactly what I want. Hopefully you guys have seen this conversion method before. I'm going through it quickly because I know most people have learned this before. Cancel the 6's here, we got 10. I'm gonna cancel out that 0 at the end of the 5280. So now I've got 528 over 60. All right, I'm lazy. Let me think about this a little bit. So what is this number? Again, I could drive myself nuts. I could keep reducing it. I could go long division here. Kind of a pain. I could do all that stuff. But you know what? All I really want to know is something about how this question, we're still on the question here, by the way, the rephrasing of the question, I want to know it in terms of 9 and 8. So what do I know about this number? It's somewhere between 8 and 9. So my question is the rate greater than, what is this thing? So 8 times 60 would give me 480. 9 times 60 would give me 540. So what is this? About 8.8, something like that? Rate greater than 8.8 feet per second. I'm not exact, but I don't need to be. And that's the key here. So my question is the rate greater than 8.8 feet per second? Well, it's less than 9, so that's a big fat maybe, not sufficient. Statement 2, the rate is greater than 8, but I want to know, is it greater than 8 point something, 8.8? That's gone. Put them together. All we know is that the rate is somewhere between 8 and 9. But I want to know, is the rate actually greater than 8.8? That's somewhere in between, not sufficient. Props to anybody who got an E there. And again, it's not so much that this is an impenetrable, difficult question. The issue here for most people, it's still hard to get right. But the harder part is doing it quickly. The more thoughtful you can be, taking that step back a little bit beforehand and going, what are the steps that are going to make my life easy? Do I really need to be precise and do a bunch of long division? I don't really. This is good enough. I know it's 8 point something, 8.7, 8.8, something like that. And if I'm smart about saying, let me push the question fully, convert the question, not convert the two statements, means about half as much work. So much easier. You can get through it in 2 minutes. All right. Next one, two guys named Kevin and Clay buying new popcorn machines. Again, 10 points. Nobody's gotten the reference yet. And this is one of the wordiest questions that the GMAT has. I changed some of the wording around a little bit, pretty much intact from the original in terms of the spirit of it. And I swear the math is not that bad on this. Once you read through it all, it's not that horrible. Give you guys a couple minutes. Beautiful. Getting all kinds of answers from the live group makes me happy. It means we picked something nice and tough. So here's the thing, like when you get a lot of people just get intimidated by these long questions on the GMAT. A little bit of a story. So I started this part's a long story. I started working on a PhD in education policy and psychometrics once upon a time. Reading a lot of stuff about kind of what's the guts underneath standardized testing. How does this stuff work? And you read paper after paper after paper, as you do as a PhD student. One thing I ran across a paper that was kind of asking the question, well, all right, if you think about the qualities of these test questions, there's difficulty. So how difficult is this question? Is it a 600 level question, a 650, a 500, a 700? Difficulty is a characteristic of the question. You could also think of length as a characteristic, length in terms of how much time it takes you. So I would think intuitively, questions that take you longer must be harder. There must be a positive relationship between difficulty and length in terms of the time it takes. So somebody went out and did a study, looked at a whole bunch of major American standardized tests, SAT, GRE, ASVAB, a bunch of different stuff, and said, well, yeah, in general, there's a positive relationship between the length and difficulty on almost every standardized test. There was one exception that I remember from the study, and that was the GMAT. In general, the longer questions on average are actually a little bit easier, not a lot easier. Don't take this too seriously. A little bit easier. Just because it's long doesn't mean it's hard. If anything, the opposite tends to be true. The GMAT's really artful about taking a really simple looking question. Think about that inequality question that ate you guys alive, the third or fourth one we did. Short, elegant, not a lot going on, really, really hard. This one arguably is hard, but the thing is it's short. When you actually think about what you need, it's a Russian novel. It's long in terms of number of words on the page. But if you're thoughtful, it's actually not that hard if you can cut to what do they really want here. Very, very typical. Bottom line is don't get intimidated by a long, wordy question. Odds are pretty good, not for sure, obviously. Pretty good. It's actually the math underneath that's not that hard. This is intimidating. I want no part of this. But what are they asking me for? I want to know what's the relationship between Kevin and Clay's monthly payments. So Kevin's monthly payment is what percent of Clay's. Really just want the ratio of them in some sense, right? Like you just want to know, is one of them sometimes the other one? If you divide one by the other, what do you get? A whole bunch of different ways to rewrite that. We could think of it as, we'll write it this way. M for Kevin equal to what percent of M for Clay? That's messy, but if I just want this X and its data sufficiency, I'm not worried about the 100. All I really want is that ratio. Give me the ratio of Kevin's monthly payment to Clay's monthly payment, and I got this. Now, if you start manipulating this thing like crazy, you're missing the point. Not good GMAT mindset. Maybe we're going to have to manipulate some stuff, but let me see what I can get around. I'm lazy. I don't want to do a lot of arithmetic. I don't want to do a lot of steps. That's what gets me through smoothly. What do we know? Well, both of these fine gentlemen, same interest rate. That's the same. Not affecting the monthly payment. That N, they told us in the question, that's the same for both of them, not affecting the monthly payment. All the rest of these are constants. What's going to determine everything? Just that P. In essence, the difference in their monthly payments is going to be 100% a function of the difference in their P. That's it. And P is multiplicative here. You could kind of think of it this way. You could sort of factor out the P, and really what you have is M equals P times this whole thing. This thing is the same for both of these fine gentlemen. Only thing that's going to determine the difference is what's the ratio of their P's. You could even rewrite the question. What's the ratio of Kevin's principal to Clay's principal? Now, statement one, exactly right on the button, gives you what you're looking for. If we know that Clay's monthly payment is 4 times Kevin's, great, that absolutely gives you that ratio we're looking for, which gives you that percentage. A is sufficient. And statement two, again, if you've put in the work, not mechanical work, not a lot of arithmetic, not a lot of manipulating, just thinking about, hey, what do I really need to know? I need to know what's the ratio of their principal amounts. Statement two gives you that on a silver platter, and your answer is D. Nasty, tough one to get through in 2 minutes, but if you take that step back, invest up front, figure out what you really need, push the question, you're in really good shape. Quick shout out to Gita Panda and Chandra Kumar, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing anything or misreading anything quickly here. Thank you so much. Great comments. I'm just enjoying what you guys are popping up there. Same thing with Saeed. Thank you so much, guys. All right, last one for today. This one, if you have seen it before and you know the trick, I suppose, pretty easy. And by the way, I apologize for the typo on the top line of this. Those should all be A's, not S's. This one's a tough one if you haven't seen it before. Give you guys a couple minutes, and this will be our last one for today. All right, this is fun. We're 3 minutes in, and so far on the live group, nothing. Give you guys another, let's go 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds. All right, now we're getting some stuff. Tough question. And again, one of the things I threatened kind of at the top of this broadcast is as you get to the harder and harder questions, my nice, clean, pretty little sound bites go away. I mean, I can sit here and say things about, yeah, here's the way to approach sentence correction at a basic level. You look for the definite errors first, step one. Step two, you compare the answer choices and you look for the differences in meaning. Great, clean, pretty, nice. And again, as I get harder and harder, all the nuances start to drip in and that nice, simple soundbite goes away. Hard data sufficiency. Yeah, I can sit here and say, push your question, be thoughtful, plan your attack before you jump in. Those are really nice things to say. This guy's just hard. And what this one's all about is just pattern recognition and trying to see if you can figure out what's going on here before you dive in. Sure, but it's actually just a really, really tough thing to do if you haven't seen this before. So all I'm trying to do as a starting point is get my head around this because I have no idea. Look at those answer choices. K is less than 19. That means absolutely nothing to me. So what is this? What is this thing, this sequence? So if n is 1, let's punch in a 1 for n. 1 over 1 minus 1 over 2. I'll do a thing that's maybe not the best idea here, and I get a half. Now, what if n's 2? What do I get? 1 over 2 minus 1 over 3. And my hope is that I'm getting some sort of pattern here somewhere. And what I really want to have happen, so 1/3 minus a quarter, I think that's 1/12. I really am not seeing a very nice pattern here on the right side. I'd be really happy if this was like a half, a quarter, an eighth. So if it was going down by a half every time or something like that, that'd be cool. I'm just not seeing it. So it turns out over here, I'm actually barking up the wrong tree because the pattern just isn't really there. I'm going to ignore that. But what are we being asked for here? So the sum of the first k terms, and k is basically equal to n here. So some of those terms, what do I get as the sum of those terms? Well, let's think about what happens. Let's just think about what we have here for the first 4 terms. 1 minus a half plus a half minus a third plus a third minus a quarter plus a quarter. Can you hear it now? These are going to cancel out. These are going to cancel out. These are going to cancel out. So what's my sum? My sum is always going to be 1 minus whatever this last guy is, minus 1 over n plus 1. That's what the sum is always going to be here. So, okay, so now we want to know, is the sum greater than 9/10? Well, it's actually not so hard to turn that into something nice. So question is the sum greater than 9/10? What does that mean? We're taking 1 and we're subtracting a 10th from it. So when is this thing going to be a 10th? That thing is going to be a 10th. So I can do this algebraically if you'd like. So we can rephrase this as 1 over n plus 1. When is this thing going to be less than a 10th? And that's going to happen when n is 9. So when n is greater than 9, this thing starts to be less than a 10th. If n is equal to 9, it's going to be exactly a 10th. If you want this to be less than a 10th, when n is greater than 9, tricky, tricky translation. And again, n and k are basically the same thing here. So is k greater than 9? Statement 1, not sufficient. Statement 2, there you go. Basically exactly what we're looking for. And your answer is B. Chandra Kumar again, nicely done. So your answer here is B. Okay, so as you get to the nasty ones, pattern recognition, those hard number properties questions. Would love to spend another couple hours going through that, but your eyeballs are going to dissolve if I do that. That wraps it up for the series, guys. 8 videos, just trying to get your minds right on the GMAT, developing a winning GMAT mindset, your frame of mind, your approach. That's a thing we tend to forget. You can learn all the math you want to from books, great books out there, great people in test prep in the GMAT world. Tons of fantastic resources out there to learn the mathematics, to learn the grammar. What we're really after in this 8 video series, let's get your heads right, get you approaching things the right way, get you obsessing on the right things, ignoring the right things. All right, that wraps it up. We'll be back at some point with another series. This is the time to hit that subscribe button. As soon as there's updates, as soon as we have that next series, you'll know all about it. Hit that big fat subscribe button when we're done here. And thank you everybody for sticking with us for 8 videos. And we will see you at some point later this year. And now's my favorite part. I'm going to stare blankly at the camera for a couple minutes until it shuts off. Thank you, everybody.